Have you ever pondered why India, a land of diverse cultures, languages, and religions, was partitioned into two nations? What role did the British divide and rule policy play in this monumental event? In the early stages of the British rule in India, the colonizers were faced with a society beautifully complex and diverse, a mosaic of different religions, languages, and cultures. In order to maintain control over this vast and varied land, the British had to understand its intricacies. But instead of embracing this diversity, they saw an opportunity, a tool to maintain their hold on power. The British divide and rule policy was not born overnight. It was a calculated strategy rooted in their understanding of India's complex social structure. They realized that India was not a homogeneous entity, but a collection of multiple communities, each with its own distinct identity. They saw these differences not as a strength, but as a weakness to be exploited. And exploit they did. They began to drive a wedge between these communities, emphasizing their differences and downplaying their commonalities. They painted a picture of a divided society, a society where Hindus and Muslims, Sikhs and Christians could not coexist peacefully. In this way, the British began to manipulate the existing divisions and communal differences. They fostered antagonism between different religious groups, subtly encouraged animosity, and sowed the seeds of discord. They played on the fears and insecurities of the people, using them to their advantage. This was the genesis of the British divide and rule policy, a policy designed to create divisions, to destroy friendships, to ruin families, a policy that disregarded the rich traditions of the land and misread its history, a policy that tore apart minds and hearts. Thus, the seeds of division were sown, setting the stage for one of the most tragic events in the history of the Indian subcontinent. As time passed, this policy of division took on a more sinister form, turning friends into foes, families into fragments, and a united land into divided territories. The British divide and rule policy, a carefully crafted strategy, began to evolve and deepen its roots in the Indian subcontinent. One of the key events that marked this evolution was the formation of the Indian National Congress in 1885, which was initially supported by the British. However, as the Congress began to demand self-rule, the British perceived this unity as a threat and responded by encouraging the establishment of the All India Muslim League in 1906. This was a calculated move to create a rift between Hindus and Muslims, two significant religious communities in India. Playing on religious sentiments, the British fostered an environment of mistrust and fear. They manipulated religious differences to create a narrative of two distinct communities that could not coexist peacefully. This divide was not just ideological, but was also manifested in the physical landscape of the subcontinent. Geography was hacked, and history was misread to serve the colonial agenda. Boundaries were drawn and redrawn, often splitting communities and disrupting centuries-old connections. History was selectively presented to emphasize conflicts between Hindus and Muslims, while instances of peaceful coexistence and shared cultural heritage were conveniently overlooked. This manipulation of history and geography was not just an act of division, but also a denial of tradition. It tore apart minds and hearts, fostering a sense of animosity that had never existed before. The British had successfully turned India's diversity into its biggest weakness, paving the way for a catastrophic partition. The tragic partition of India in 1947 marked the end of British rule, but the scars of their divisive policy still linger. This scene unfolds in the immediate aftermath of the partition, a period marked by widespread violence, displacement, and an unspeakable loss of life. The departure of the British was far from a peaceful transition. In fact, it was a hurried exit that left the subcontinent in a state of chaos and despair. The British divide and rule policy had successfully worked to exacerbate Hindu-Muslim tensions, which were now erupting in a catastrophic wave of communal violence. Friendships were destroyed, families were ruined, and geography was hacked apart, all products of a policy designed to prevent unity. But the effects of the divide and rule policy didn't end with the partition. It left a legacy that continues to impact the region today. The creation of India and Pakistan, born out of this policy, led to ongoing tensions between the two nations that persist to this day. Border disputes, territorial conflicts, and regional instability are all part of the aftermath of this divisive strategy. The long-term effects of the divide-and-rule policy have been profound and far-reaching. It has led to a deep-seated communal hatred that has torn apart minds and hearts, a hatred that has been passed down from generation to generation. Misreadings of history and denials of tradition have further fueled these divisions, making reconciliation a daunting task. While the British Empire may have left the Indian shores, the echoes of their divide-and-rule policy continue to reverberate, a grim reminder of a colonial past.